Hey guys, how you doing? We've just hit March, which means now it's a great time to talk about all the books read in February. So thanks for sitting down with me for a little bit, and let's start with the start. Beginning of the month, I read an ebook, Mrs. Hudson and the Malabar Rose by Martin Davies. It is the second in a series set in the traditional Victorian England, where Sherlock Holmes is taking cases, only in this universe, Mrs. Hudson has a history of solving crimes or little problems within the places where she's been in service. And because she is an expert at housekeeping, runs things like a tight ship, got everything down, makes brilliant food, she sees the domestic matters and the little things on the day-to-day running of things that Sherlock might overlook because his mind is like an attic, and he gets rid of all the things he doesn't think he needs, like the solar system. But Mrs. Hudson has some more has some of the connections through the grocers and butchers and everything, and all the ground level of London, which helps her have different viewpoint to him. It's not very much saying Sherlock Holmes isn't capable, isn't a wonder in his own right, solving crimes. It's saying that she's got a different viewpoint and is got brains and understands human nature. And before she comes to Sherlock Holmes's service, she meets a orphan, Flotsam, who is the POV character of the book. She's young teens, who is intelligent and a hard worker, also getting quite good at these detective things and noticing little things. So Britain has been gifted the Malabar Rose, this impressive gemstone. It's big, it's got like this very gorgeous effect, which almost looks like it's flaming. Only one of the conditions of the gifting is that they need to exhibit it for people to come and see this beautiful rock. Only this is then the perfect time for people to try and steal it. At the same time as this has been exhibited, this magician is performing in London, and everywhere this magician goes, valuables have been stolen. So Sherlock Holmes is hired to help the protection of the stone. And it's sort of the case of Mrs. Hudson and Sherlock Holmes's cases, like investigations, dovetailing together. Seem like two different cases, but you can sort of tell they're linked, and they dovetail together when they both come together to solve this case and stop the theft. It is just a fun story, Victorian, very much just sort of the downstairs angle, although through Mrs. Hudson they do have a link to some sort of more magentry level, so you get both upstairs downstairs sort of approaches to solving the crime, and it just comes together really well. It's interesting. It's a fun read. Okay, then we get to the books that I read in my reading the 24 hours straight video. I decided, let's just KO my sleeping pattern. Don't really need that much. But anyway, now I'm back. We'll just sleep and talk about books. I read Immortal by Sue Lynn Tan. This was the favorite adult book for January. Took me a second to think it through. January. Okay, this is very much a Chinese mythology inspired tale of Lian, who becomes empress of the kingdom of Taxamania. I'm probably really mispronouncing that. And the political a realm of humans who have been cut off from the rest of humanity to serve the gods and defend this archway from these other mortals they've been at war with. But now the war's been over for generations of humans, and they're guarding this realm, even though there are still attacks, and the humans don't actually have weapons that can actually kill these immortals they're fighting against, so it seems slightly misplaced and rather unfair on the humans. But Lian, the main character, becomes empress, wants to give her people freedom because they're at the mercy of the whims of the gods. They don't quite consider humanity as equals and sort of look down on them for their short life, and they don't have these magical powers that these immortals have. And it's sort of a political intrigue of her trying to get that freedom, and there being sort of currents of there's more going on than she's aware of between these mortals, and the misunderstanding on both sides of the battles, of the war, of what caused all this to start with, and the propaganda almost both sides, and the humans not really knowing enough, and it all coming together in this battle and a love story between Lion and the God of War, which is an interesting dynamic, and it comes into a very sweet relationship. But yeah, it's an interesting good read, which is less, I was about to say little, but it's like 400 pages, fancy book, but there's a little more. Then we come to Frontier by Grace Curtis, a Western vibes future sci-fi dystopian when basically climate change has decimated a lot of Earth, and most of humanity have just abandoned the stars, except from these religious extremists who basically have Mother Earth as their goddess and feel as though it's that they should stay on Earth and that it's blasphemous and these sinners who went to space, and that they deserve the punishments for what they've done on Earth. When someone from space comes to Earth and is looking for someone, that the woman she's in love with, this doctor who's very much for peace, and when she's a soldier who's trying to be better for her love, and who's a fantastic shot, fantastic with shoulder, but trying not to be violent anymore in this very violent situations, and she's making her way through this and sort of trying to reunite, and it's exploring different ways people have approached and this living on Earth through a decision that isn't them, it's their ancestors who decided we're staying here centuries ago, and people trying to make the most of this and do how religion and politics and just trying to survive in this environment has made humanity, which is just a really interesting, fun read. And then we have Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Sutanto, which is a great murder mystery where Vera Wong has a tea shop which it's not really doing well. She has one consistent customer and she's just struggling through this routine of life. She's very regimented, very driven, but it hasn't quite gone how she wanted it to. She's lost her husband, her son barely communicates with her, and she's sort of stuck in a rut and not sure where to go. And then she comes down one morning and there's a dead body in the middle of a shop. They've broken in and she's this person's obviously been murdered. She draws a line around the body because, you know, that's what police do in her mind. The police don't take her trying to be involved and go, no, this is just someone who just basically died in natural causes or something. And there's no proof of murder. They don't take it too seriously, partly because she's taken some evidence. And then she doesn't really want to admit, well, I've taken this hard drive, so... And she's going to solve this crime. And she goes and finds a list of suspects. And then there's a found family vibe of the suspects, even when she's going, no, she openly tells them, no, you're my suspects. And they're going, wait, what? And then the dynamic between them as she solves the case, and that she helps them basically in their lives and dealing with, well, the after effects, because the guy's murdered. Not a nice guy, wasn't a great influence in any of these people's lives, and sort of they help each other to sort of find happiness and purpose and drive in life again, which is great. It's with such humour and such love for the characters, it's great. And then we have another ebook, and my first, Ali Hazelwood, a little romance here. One of her little novellas, Below Zero, is a STEM romance with a focus on NASA. Two love interests meet, they hit it off, but the guy's like, oh yeah, I want to take you on a date, you have a relationship, see where this goes, and she doesn't really do relationship dynamics like that because she doesn't feel as though when people meet her, like spend time with her and get to know her, they actually want to keep spending time with her. So she's just very much just physical relationship kind of girl. And so they go, now this isn't going to work. They split off, and then they meet again when she joins NASA. It seems they've got a great dynamic, got a great rapport going on. Then there's miscommunication, where she then thinks that he's an enemy because he stopped funding for something, but they haven't really communicated about why. The book opens with her basically in a fitter in the Arctic with a storm coming in, and he's coming to rescue her before she freezes to death because she's injured her ankle, she cannot get out of there. And it's sort of flashing back and forward through the relationship and comes together in a, you know, funny, steamy in some ways relationship, which is quite, it's a nice little read. And then we have Seven Husbands of Evelyn, Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is very addictive to read, very much the old Hollywood glamour of a movie star, and sort of who's doing a tell-all biography with a reporter who isn't too well known, but she's picked out saying, I want an interview with her, and then they sort of brought you in false pretenses, you're going to write, I want you to write my biography. And then it becomes the sort of the mysteries of her past and the tell-all things about her, how she became a movie star, the ups and downs of behind the scenes and her relationships, including the 7 husbands, some which she loved, some which were just propaganda or sort of smoke screens for her real secret love behind the scenes, which is a sweet relationship, but they're both in some ways slightly toxic with each other at times, and it's sort of the interesting dynamics between them and the mystery of why she's chosen to support her out of relative obscurity, which is very, very addictive to read. I don't think it's just challenging to read's writing style, but it's very gossip driven and somewhat emotional, and you can kind of see where all the characters are coming from, even though I don't always agree with their actions. And yeah, I still rather Daisy Jones and Sex. I think that grabbed me a bit more, felt a bit juicier, and just, I don't know, it is a brilliant book, very sort of Elizabeth Taylor-esque inspired character. You can sort of see the inspiration coming through, and it's very much got the glamour. I think I would, okay, when it comes to movies, I would like to know a bit more about the movie making process, some behind the scenes politics and stuff, but it's not so much about the actual making of the movies and the movies themselves, which when it comes to Hollywood is sort of something I'm slightly more interested in, because it was focused on the human factor and her relationships and dynamics, which is juicy and riveting, but I still would have liked a bit more about the actual being on set, making these movies, and sort of about how movies hit simply because of like the stories themselves. Well, it is very much about the star power of Evelyn Hugo and the dynamics that brings in, but I think it's just my preoccupation with liking to know a bit more about the mechanics and business, which isn't just the personal relationships, so how much who you know, big part of Hollywood in this time, I know, and that sort of industry in general. But yeah, it's interesting, great read. And then we come to Just One Damn Thing After Another by Jodi Taylor, which I just love the concept of this book so much. Well, the whole series, there's quite a few books in it, and a spin-off series about time traveling police, because this book is about tea-addicted time-traveling historians, which is just so up my alley. It's ridiculous, and it is fun. It is a fun novel which basically introduces you to St. Mary's, the institution with the time travel, and it comes in as though someone is being interviewed for a position, goes pretty much straight into the interview, and then through training, and then it's sort of into them, and you get her being there, doing the job, and then there are issues that crop up, and dynamics shift, and time travel shenanigans, which is always fun, and people who want time travel technology comes into it, so it's very much it's got a bit of mystery in there with that, which is fun to read, and it's very sort of in very ways fast paced, and a lot happens, just not quite just one damn thing after another, but just a lot happens in the book, and it's just a fun read. So the next 2 books I read, I no longer have physical copies because I borrowed them from the library and I've since returned them. So the first is The Turnglass by Gareth Rubin, and this is fascinating partly for the format of a novel, because I love novels that play with their own format and reference how they're playing with it, and just have a lot of fun with form and how that informs a story and sort of the craft of how they've made it, which is just fascinating to read and just adds more layers to some works, which is just brilliant. And this one is a Tete Biche novel, which who knows if I'm saying that right, but basically what that means is one book, you open at one side, you have a story that you read through, and you get to the middle, you finish your first story, you then stop, close the book, turn it over, and then there's another story on the other side, which then you can though read through. In this one, these 2 stories inform and play into each other, and each of the stories within the book play includes a Tete Bente novel as part of the plots in their two mysteries, their two murder mysteries together, and they both of them reference the other book. One of them is a 1880s murder mystery where a doctor goes to his great uncle's, great cousin's, a family member's house because he's ill. But then when he gets there, he finds that his uncle, I'm going to go with uncle because he ends up calling him his uncle, his uncle's sister-in-law is kept in this glass segregated area off the library because she's considered insane and for her part in murdering her husband. There are mysteries and things is going on within this, and this dynamic is quite interesting for this young doctor, and he's trying to solve everything in the case, and it sort of becomes a very interesting look into the past, and then the Tete Bente novel comes into it as part of solving the case. And then if you flip it over to the other side, this is the 1930s in Hollywood, and it is this wannabe actor who's auditioning for movies. He goes to a party and ends up meeting this famous writer, and they hit it off and end up hanging out together quite a lot. But then his friend seemingly kills himself, but Ken, the protagonist, doesn't believe he would have done that, and saw some things that made him suspicious. So then it's him trying to solve the mystery of what happened to his friend, and that leads down a rabbit hole about the family history and his book that he had published in a Tete Bente novel, even though the other half was someone else's novel, not involved. But the Tete Bente novel, the book he wrote, is the 1880s story we've read with Simeon Lee solving the case with his uncle. And then it's very much that ties into solving the mystery and the family history, which is it's inspired by the author's family history himself, and then it sort of ties into, because the things to do with the 1930s glass house where he writes is referenced in the novel previously, and sort of the mystery within the mystery, and using the book as an aid to solve the book in there. So they're very much the two playing into each other, and it's really an interesting sort of puzzle piece, which is really easy to read, easy to understand, nice little mysteries together. I personally prefer the 1880s mystery just because I think that just vibed with me more, but it's just a really nice read. The second book I read was Home by Toni Morrison, which is a gorgeously written book about a veteran of the Korean War who's come home, been discharged, and is handling his past trauma from the war and losing his friends and everything that went, and questioning himself and his previous actions through alcohol dependency, and basically burying himself in a relationship with a woman who's basically just a plaster over the wound of him just not dealing with anything in his PTSD and some hallucination situation. And then basically him being on a mission to find his sister, since he's had a letter saying if you don't come she's gonna die. So he's come to try and save his sister, and it's the story of the journey to do that, and it's sort of his sister's POV saying how her life was after he left, because she very much followed him around and they're very close, and he was her protector. I mean, it's her without her protector, and being very naive and trying to find her way in life, and the dynamics of that situation, how she got into the trouble. And it's got an interesting sort of approach to it, because there are also chapters, so the character are then talking to the writer about how they've said that they were narrating and their thought process, and arguing about how well the narrator knows the character, and also about how well the narrator's own, how the character has been sort of bearing their own memories of situations, and it's sort of an interesting dialogue within itself about sort of the relationship between writer and character, which is really fun and nice to see. And it's just, there's a lot of sympathy for the characters, and they're all written with a lot of love and sympathy, and with interesting dynamic voices, so they just feel very, you can kind of see where they're coming from, even though and sort of see all the nuances of their characters and of their life choices, and it's just a really, really interesting read. Okay, and then I had actually finished the audio book High Rise because it's something I've been reading in bursts as I've been doing things for a little while. So High Rise by H.G. Ballard is an interesting look into a high-rise building. The higher up you are, like the higher class you are, and the better amenities you have in this high-rise, is an encompassing dynamic where everything's people become very focused on the high-rise and their life in the high-rise and their positions and dynamics, and then society within the high-rise starts to break down and people fall to animalistic urges in some ways, and there's sort of dynamics of people are trying to hold lifts so only certain people can use the lifts, and like keep a very much a power dynamic where people are fighting other floors, and there's lots of breaks of violence. Breakdown society, and it's into exploration, well written, brilliant written. Slightly interesting how when all this is happening, the outside world seems to be just carrying on as normal, and no one thinks, like, you know, all these bodies are piling up, maybe we should call the authorities. No, our life outside the high rise sort of goes by the wayside, and people, because they come so focused on the high rise and the sort of maneuvering between, you know, what level of society you're seen as, what floor you're seen as, and all that. It becomes so much all encompassing that by the time everything breaks down completely and amenities break down and everything's just a bit of a mess and violent and sort of Lord of the Flies breakdown of society, people just don't seem to think of contacting that so well. They're so focused on the inside, and then the main character of it is trying to get up the high rise, and because the designer of high rise lives there and sort of wants to confront this man, and it is an interesting read and compelling, but also doesn't seem to have a lot of faith in humanity at all, really, since how much people just seem to go down in, like, how much it breaks down and how fast it breaks down, because it all happens in quite a short period of time. But then the people in there just become so consumed by it that they don't really lose a sense of time in the outside world and of the rest of society and its rules and expectations and societal norms. They're just sort of gone, a lot of it, which is it's an interesting read. And it's brilliantly narrated by Tom Hiddleston, who captures a lot of interesting essence of the book. And I think he did, because he did the film I Rise in like a decade ago now, 2015. I thought that was so long ago. Haven't seen it, but it should be interesting to have a look and like compare them at some point. Do that. Okay, and the last book I finished in February was Upon a Frosted Star by M.A. Kuzniar, which is a gorgeously written lyrical tale which sort of combined, the comp titles are The Great Gatsby and Swan Lake, and it is this sort of a tale of curses and love and obsession and sort of the decadence of the 1920s England, combined with like the two people are the two main love interests who have POVs in here are artists who are very much show a lot of themselves and their emotions and very much give themselves to their art form, and how coming together they're very, in some ways, slightly insta love, in some ways they don't have too much interaction together, but there is gaps between it where like the main character is very much obsessively artistically drawing his muse, and that sort of obsession brings a strong connection, because they very much have an instant spark, and they spend some time together and get to know each other, but there are magical elements that keep them apart to some degree, and it's very much trying to then battle together to beat this curse. And although it's got some, because it sometimes sits in these moments, and it's got a bit of, it doesn't always have the most fast paced, but it's very atmospheric, so atmospheric as a book, and a very interesting read. So yeah, those are the, wait, what? And 10. Those are the 10 books I read in February. It's a nice little mix of different things. Although I haven't read a history book in a while. Thanks for listening. Hope you've enjoyed hearing my thoughts on these nice selection of books. I can't wait to see what happens in March. So have you read any great books last month? Have you got any great books you're going to read this month? And actually, I have actually read one of the books of my 25 books to read in 2025 TBR as well with Frontier, which is good to actually get one of those off 2 months into the year. I really need to start focusing on that more. There's a reason I don't do monthly TBRs. They would never be able to. But thank you for listening, and I hope you found a great book to read and enjoy. And let me know if you've read any of them in the comments, what you thought of anything. But hope you have a great time, read some great books, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.